This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Exvangelical, a show exploring the world inside and outside the evangelical subculture. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. I've said those words in some fashion for a little over 8 years now. The first time I said that was in July of 2016. That was when I first released the first episode of the show, and the context of that was it was dropped during the same week as the Republican National Convention, during which Donald Trump secured the nomination for the presidency. He was then running against the exceedingly qualified Hillary Clinton for the highest role in the land for president. And in 2016, white evangelicals came out at record numbers to support Donald Trump. And in 2020, they also came out in record numbers to support Donald Trump. And again, in 2024, they did the same thing. So for the third time, white evangelicals voted for Donald Trump in an overwhelming majority. Plenty of other demographics also voted for him, but come on, this show is called Exvangelical. And when I say record numbers, what I mean by that is that he had received the highest percentage of white evangelical support of any president prior to Trump's election in 2016. And he's maintained that 80+% capture of white evangelicals ever since that date. His criminal record for 34 felonies regarding hush money, as well as another conviction for sexual abuse, weren't enough to sway white evangelicals from their steadfast support. And at this point, we're far beyond offering the litany of offenses that he and those in his orbit have done, and we're also far beyond it really mattering. The fact is that for 3 election cycles, this particular voting bloc has looked at Trump approvingly and offered him their votes. No matter what any well-meaning Christians did or said to convince their siblings in faith to dissuade them from supporting this particular candidate. And Trump has a strong voting base among Catholics and other Protestants as well. According to Religion News Service, Trump also won the Christian vote overall. 58% of all Catholics voted for him and 63% of Protestants, according to the early exit polls. If the early exit poll numbers hold steady, that will prove to be a jump in Catholic support for Trump compared to 2020, when 50% of Catholics voted for him. It didn't matter how many seminars and workshops were done on Christian nationalism or depolarization. There was no changing the minds of that remaining 19 to 20 that would increase the number of white evangelicals to defect from loyalty to Trump beyond that 19 to 20% of white evangelicals. But the story this time around seems to be around media's role in how the election turned out. If you want to start to understand that, you're in luck. My book does cover that. My book is called Exvangelical and Beyond: How American Christianity Went Radical and the Movement That's Fighting Back. I think there's a lot to talk about how the right is better at messaging, and even more so at populist or just popular podcasting and other forms of social media. There's so many pieces that have been published about it in the weeks since the election. One from Fast Company, one from Slate, one from Pointer. I've linked all of these on my newsletter at the Post-Evangelical Post. And this is what flooding the zone looks like. The full phrase is flooding the zone with shit, which is attributed to Steve Bannon. But plainly put, the DNC wasn't aware enough of the role that media plays in the formation of people's beliefs and how that spurs political action. That's going to be a hard game to catch up on, especially when most of the media platforms are owned and operated by libertarian tech bros, billionaires that obey in advance, or outright political actors cavalierly breaking campaign laws and putting the thumb on the scale of their dying social network like Elon Musk has done. I will link to a few takes that are worth your time, but I'm releasing this during the week of Thanksgiving, and I'm fortunate enough to have some time off this week. And so I'm thinking about things. And I'll be honest with you, I really thought that when I published my book, that in a number of ways, it would sort of be the capstone of what I've been doing here over the last several years. That it would be the capstone on my work on the topics of evangelical Christianity, deconstruction, and all the myriad ways it influences our personal and social life. But given where things are headed, I imagine that I'll be talking and writing about it for a long while still. But I do want to just acknowledge that I am at a crossroads as far as what I do with this particular space here, what I do with this particular show, and what I do with the remainder of my work. This has always been something that I have been passionate about. And even in 2019, after a significant personal loss, as well as a concomitant falling out that happened online back then, this was work that I was drawn back to because it is something that I see value in. And I poured a lot over the last several years into the book. And I am thrilled that it is making waves and that people are finding it and listening to it and reading it. And I do hope that more and more people do find their way to it, because I did try to write this book in a way that complemented those that are already on the market. Ones like Sarah McCammon's, ones that sit alongside all of the various books about Christian nationalism, ones that sit alongside memoirs and others that champion people's stories of survival. And I don't know what precisely to do with this space, with this particular show. I think when there's been instances where I haven't been able to schedule interviews, or I haven't been able to, especially within the context of speaking to authors, if I haven't read a book to completion, I tend not to book authors because I want to honor the work that they put in to writing a book. And that has been my focus for a long time. And you will likely see me gravitate towards the spaces where people are going, which means I'm going to finally, kicking and screaming, learn how to do video and publish to places like YouTube. You can already subscribe to this audio podcast on YouTube, but I'll begin publishing video content to YouTube and all the other short form places that you can post video to. I think that if anyone is telling you that they know what's coming in the next Trump administration, they are trying to sell you something. None of us really know the extent of what we're about to see. But I do believe, and I did write recently in a Religion News Service article that was an op-ed that was published on Election Day, that this sort of fight against what we now call Christian nationalism, exvangelicals are undertapped. They do not have the level of resources that evangelicals do, and they are often not found in progressive Christian places. They are often also found there, but not all of them. And exvangelical nuns, secular, atheist, agnostic, ex-evangelicals, as well as just people who don't even adopt any of those labels, but are concerned about the growing presence of overt Christian nationalist authoritarian moves in our government, which is already prevalent and already seen plainly in a number of different cabinet picks that President-elect Trump has made. In particular, his nomination for the Secretary of Defense. I'm concerned, and I will continue to try to draw attention to that and try to find people to speak to about these issues. And I hope that you will continue to listen. I hope that this show over the last several years has been a source of consolation, a place where you can find kindred spirits of a sort, and a place where you can start your journey towards healing and towards other things. That has always been my goal. Really, the things that have motivated me over the last several years have just been about hearing people's stories and having the privilege of sharing just one small part of someone's story. And through that, I have shared a little bit about my own story, but that has not always been the focus, and that won't be the focus moving forward either. I did recently share on my newsletter that I will be expanding focus to author interviews, book recommendations, and other book-related content under the banner of The Good Books, which has been, you may have noticed over the last year, most of my author interviews have that title before them. And that will continue, and I will eventually break out a different podcast feed for that, as well as co-publish relevant episodes here as well. But nonetheless, I know that reading alone won't save us, but reading is how I make sense of the world and its history. And as I wrote in the introduction to my book, I use history in the same way journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones describes it, that history revealed the building blocks of the world I now inhabited, explaining how communities, institutions, and relationships came to be. It provided the key to decode all that I saw around me. I might even love reading more than writing. Even when I'm watching a show or a movie or something online, it's usually a turn of phrase that moves me more than the visuals. And I have loved that my public work has connected me to authors willing to talk to me about their books. Writing a book is not a flippant task. It takes dedication and focus and a hell of a lot of work. And I try to honor that in each author interview I do, and I'll do my utmost to carry that same posture into the rest of this work too. But again, as far as what you find here on this show, I'm interested to hear from you. If you want to reach out to me on Blue Sky, that is where I'm hanging out online these days at brchastain.social. Tell me. I'm not really sure. But I know I'm not going anywhere, but I'm in this space of uncertainty. And it's a space that I wasn't anticipating following the release of my book, but it is where I find myself. And again, like I said, given where things are headed, I imagine I'll be talking and writing about these things for a long while still. And at the same time, the Exvangelical counterpublic that I write about in my book is really robust now. People have a shared language to use to discuss their experiences in evangelicalism, their experiences leading it. They have news sources, commentary sources like Straight White American Jesus, all number of podcasters and Instagrammers and TikTokers, books across multiple genres. It has its own momentum and is going to continue to expand in a variety of directions. I'm excited. I remain excited to play whatever part I can in that with whatever resources I'm able to provide to it. If you're interested in that work, you can support it by going over to postevangelicalpost.com and signing up for a paid subscription for $5 a month, $50 a year, or just tell people about this show. I do hope to get back to more regular posting here and elsewhere. And in the meantime, I do want to also tell you about an in-person gathering that'll be happening in Atlanta, Georgia next February called Content Warning, where this will be both a in-person gathering as well as a live stream opportunity called, again, Content Warning. It's a unique event with over 20 collaborators or podcasters, authors, therapists, speakers, and creators that want to reinvigorate the conversation happening around sex and sexuality in faith deconstruction spaces where people are healing from purity culture. This event is designed to bring forward intersectional topics that we don't always see discussed in these spaces. It will have panel discussions, facilitated conversations, and a live stream option for those who can't make it in person. The hope is to make this an annual gathering in various locations, striving to build inclusive community. you can head over to contentwarningevent.com. That again is contentwarningevent.com. And you can use the promo code XV10, EXVIE 10 at checkout for $10 off. Okay, this has been a little bit of one of my rambling shows with some light editing touches. I know that these types of episodes can be hit or miss, but this is the space I'm in. And I'd rather be honest than not. So thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing to subscribe, even though I have not been as regular at publishing things over the last year. I am grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to new ways of pursuing wholeness, even through a very difficult period that so many of us are worried about. I don't know. There's not going to be much tidiness in this next phase. So I'm just going to sign off, and I'll talk to you again soon.